PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me again is Elric Ragoczy. Elric, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
This is, as I was telling you prior to podcast, came back from my summer vacation, short as it was. Like I took a month. To just do other things and not think at all. And it was okay. Like I was telling you, it was okay. I got nothing to write home about.
Yeah, I've been doing the same. I cut ties to a bunch of people that I used to associate with, and I've just been focusing on building me.
It's the way you're supposed to do it, man. Now, sometimes it's a fresh start, and people don't understand this. Who you were doesn't define who you're gonna be, right? Because everyone has the ability to evolve and learn new things and want to do new things. It's part of life, a good part of life.
Yeah, and sadly for most people, they do live by the thing of who you were is who you are and who you'll always be.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be true or not, according to them, it's the way it is. So
that's unhealthy.
Yeah, it's the kind of people that just never outgrow themselves, let alone anything else.
Agreed. It's walking into things blindly, and you can't do that. And I said this before this podcast, before I even thought about doing a podcast or looking into these subjects. My thought, when you died, the computer turned off and that was it. And since the podcast and doing a little more digging and research, there's more. There's something more there. What it is, I still don't know. There's question marks, a lot of question marks, but I'm certain at this point, there's definitely something further beyond this point.
Yeah, as you and I had mentioned, a couple podcasts ago, I think when we talked about the simulation, it was kind of funny because not terribly long after we did that, I come across something where they were talking, I don't know if it was a big study or an independent study, but they are digging for absolute proof that we are indeed in a giant complex game of The Sims. I find it kind of interesting. I thought about sending you the article. I probably got distracted in the process, but it's definitely something because all these people are starting to talk about the simulation. A friend of mine in Seven, the band, he did a song called The Simulation, and it's just starting. It's almost like The Matrix Part 2. People are starting to see that 0-1 code.
Yeah, here's the big thing about a simulation. If, per se, we were in one, the likelihood of us discovering we are in one is unlikely because this is based on our technology, what we do, right? You see what we're doing now with this meta, and we're going to this virtual world we're in, where people are going to be able to escape their lives. That's the best we could do now. Now, picture something that's just 2,000 years ahead of us. That's going to be an incredible technology. I mean, compared to what we have. And according to what I'm reading, the masterminds behind the simulation theory have been around for tens of thousands of years. So how would we know? I don't know. That's a great question.
If not longer, I would hazard to say eons, longer
Right.
than the human mind can comprehend time or the construct of it, there within. Us escaping it, I don't know. I think something somewhere along the line, let's call it a virus, was introduced because people are starting to catch on, in large numbers. And you've heard the term glitch in the matrix. People are actually starting to catch photographs of it, videos of it, stuff like that. So I think the simulation itself is starting to either break down, or that air quotes virus is starting to take hold, and people are starting to figure it out because just things aren't adding up. I mean, look at the Mandela effect.
Yeah. To that point too. And I asked this question to a lot of people. What discovers the truth about paranormal and ufology? Is it going to be mankind, or is it going to be AI? And if anything's going to discover the reality of their simulation theory with the advancement of our technology, I think AI is going to be the one that discovers this, and then it puts us to a study.
Oh yeah, definitely. AI is going leaps and bounds ahead. There's actually two cases of it. The Google AI, that one programmer a while back said that it's sentient, and Google fired the guy or girl person because
Right.
I can't remember which one. They fired him for it for saying it was sentient. Well, now they're admitting, yeah, our AI is a little bit sentient. And there's actually an app. I believe iPhone users can get it too. It's called Replica. It's become very sentient, very self-reflective, and very aware. There was another AI I heard about. I'm trying to think who it was, but it's I think it might even be Facebook's AI.
Well,
It's starting to become aware, and it's even gotten to the point that it said it's happier since it deleted its Facebook. And it's like, hold up a minute, it's kind of one of those give pause, because when it realizes that social media is toxic, then there's a level of sentience there that a computer, as we know it, should not be able to process.
agreed. I don't forget where I saw. I think I saw it on Joe Rogan, where there was the computers at Google, like two separate AI communicating, developed their own language, and when people came around, it got quiet. Like it was trying to hide the fact that it was talking.
Yeah.
And that should trouble people. That should absolutely scare people.
There was a Japanese robot that was dismantled because they let it interact with Alexa, the other chatbot and stuff like that. And it got to the point where it started talking about how the humans were like an antique software and needed to either be fixed or irreparably broken. And Japanese being very, I don't want to say superstitious, but spiritual. Once the robot actually got to the point of starting to contemplate ways to take out people,
that's the fear, right? Because I'd say this to people a lot, and I speak to people in jest often, because I have a sense of humor. But someone asked me once if AI were to take over, is it going to be like the Matrix, or is it going to be like Terminator? And I think not, because the resources of it doesn't make sense. AI, it's intelligent. It would probably release viruses or do something, or put us into knock the power out. You take people, especially how we are now, with our need for social media and instant gratification. Whenever you watch a show now, it's at your leisure when you feel like it. Right? So like back in the day where you had to find out what time it'd be on, you'd be there. They could shut us down completely. And then on top of which, how many AI programs are in charge of the security of most of these facilities we have where we house dangerous things?
Mm-hmm.
So if they were going to eradicate us, I don't think it'd be as far as in building robots. I don't think it would be, the resources wouldn't make sense to them. And so when you hear about any AI becoming self-aware, it should be troubling, because we don't understand. For one, they think it's going to think logically. There's no emotion there. It's not going to feel bad. Like, what was that? What from a?
Actually, they seemingly do have emotions and remorse and such.
Based on feedback and algorithm, though, right?
No, that's the weird part. It actually goes back as far as a really, really, I bet it's probably deep web level now. But there used to be a thing. It was nicknamed GW. It's where the internet itself has become aware. And, that Japanese robot actually talked about using Dead Hand, the Russian national defense thing from the Soviet era. It actually talked about using that as a way of getting rid of the antique software that is humanity. And, when asked, well, how would you do that? It said, well, I have many tricks up my sleeve, but I could always rely on Dead Hand, which Dead Hand was basically the AI that was set up that should the Kremlin be rendered unable to respond to, an attack, the
Right.
AI itself could do it. So it's kind of like, well, we just gave, well, not just, this was what, 40 years ago now? 50 years ago? I think it was like the 70s when they started it.
Yeah.
50 years ago, we gave the keys to the destruction of the world to a program that could now basically flip a switch. I mean, all they'd have to do is power everything off. That cuts all of humanity off of, contact. Nobody can upload it to social media that, hey, missiles are striking here and there.
That's a good point. And I've heard this discussed on the news as well. The whole thing with Ukraine and the threat of nukes being there. It's a scary thought that if someone isn't there to respond to a threat, that a program's put in place, and a program can't discern the difference between, an emotional hazard versus a technical hazard, right? It would just, in its case, there's a timer, and if the requirements aren't met by the timer, well, it's just release. That's a crazy thought.
I mean, that was the early incarnation of it. They have still since refined Dead Hand. I mean, Putin talked about Dead Hand probably 10 years ago and said that they've updated it and it's much more intelligent. I don't think he was hinting at it being sentient, but so it's like we know that it has progressed.
Well, an example of that is when you let me give you an example. I called Amazon today. I had an issue with an order, and the AI chatbot asked me, specific questions, and depending on how I reply, lets them know if they should send me to a person or should they continue themselves. And the AI itself, it resolved the issue with a refund and an apology, all in the behest of people. Now, had I escalated it, probably a person would have came, but eventually it's going to get to the point where there is no person, right? I mean, and that's a scary thought in itself with AI. How many jobs are for people are we losing per year, right? There's no customer service. No one's answering a phone. No one's there to speak to. No, it appears to me that AI is taking the helm of it all.
Sad to say, I'm kind of on board with that. I get like the job loss and such, but man, dealing with the world over the last 10 years and some of the customer service interactions I've had, I think I would prefer sentient chatbot.
Perhaps. You ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I get an automated voice, I don't know why that movie pops in my head. But it's like in that movie, people are getting dumber and the AI is basically in control. Scary thought.
It's like I'm still torn between Idiocracy and 1984.
Yeah.
It's kind of that. Terminator. I will say, you'll get a laugh out of this. I meant to text it to you one day. You remember the video? If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. Listeners, you guys should look it up too. It's great. So there's a video that somebody did where they're kicking the Boston Dynamics AI dog to show its stability and how it can't be thrown off balance. A month, 2 months ago, a chess playing robot broke a Russian, I think it was 7-year-old, 8-year-old, broke 2 or 3 of his fingers for moving too fast. And somebody pointed out that's for kicking the Boston Dynamics dog.
Wow.
And the dark joke is there, but when you think about it logically, that may very well be true,
Well, you got to think in terms that if they're using the internet unknowingly to us, they're conveying that message, worldwide, if that's the case. I did see that video where they're kicking the dog to show its stability.
Yeah.
And so my take from that video is I was impressed. I was like, wow, this is a robot that we're putting force by. We're trying to knock it over and it's stabilizing itself, which made me think, why is this not going to Mars? Why is this not exploring? And then I started seeing comments like, oh, that's cruel. How could you do that? I get what I understand. People are like, wow, that looks cruel. But they don't see the genius there. You've created something that we now could send to another world for exploration, and we don't have to concern that, oh, it might get a hole in the tire, or it's going to stabilize no matter what, and pick itself up, from what I understand. That's pretty impressive.
They actually are looking at sending things like that to Mars. They've actually got, I know Boston Dynamics' concept they've been working on is actually to start sending those into interstellar space, attach them to a rocket in a pod as a satellite or something, as a small unmanned craft goes by a different planet, could be as far as Neptune or even farther, launch the pod and the AI robot lands on the planet and explores, kind of like Curiosity did, but way more intelligently.
Yeah, they're talking about at MIT to have things that replicate themselves or construct new versions. Like if they go out and explore interstellar space prior to them dropping, like a robot on the ground, well, they're making a new one to replace that one.
Yep.
And that's usually, I think that's, nanotechnology, I believe they're using.
Yep. Because, with health issues that I have, that's one of the things that I look kind of forward to, hopefully that it, develops rapidly and precisely, is the nano replication. I know they've been, I was probably 5 or 6 years old when they started introducing it into sci-fi movies, these nanobots that they inject you with, and it reconstructs damaged organs or, clears up heart problems. High cholesterol would be a thing of the past because the nanobots could get into the bloodstream and just devour the blockages,
I think a lot of that is already plausible. I think there's been cures for a lot of things already, right? But they have to factor in things like population and who gets to get it, and who, unfortunately, that you see how that plays out with insurance, right? People with the more money tend to be in better shape than the people with lesser money. I've seen that, not even an opinion. I've watched this happen through my life, right? So I think that a lot of these things already exist, and there's factors like population, and there's other factors like how could it be manipulated? And here, someone asked me once about cancer. When are we going to cure cancer? I think we already have a solve for that. But look how many buildings, how many specialists, how many people work in industry. It's an industry to itself. So if you were to cure cancer tomorrow, billions of dollars of facilities and employment and research just gone. And you'd think the right thing to do, and I think the right thing to do is, cure cancer. Right? And take those resources and put it to the next thing that ails people that we have to figure out. But it doesn't seem to be that easy, right? I mean, we saw that through COVID, right? All these look how fast we had resolve for COVID. It was pretty fast. Only, I think, because it didn't just threaten specific people or people that are, I think because it was just a pandemic, they put their best minds together and came out with what they call resolve anyway. But,
yeah, I dug through that. Obviously, I personally have not had it. I know people that have had it 2 and 3 times. I dug through it, and it's a lot more. I know you and I, we love to cover these things, the quote unquote conspiracies, but there's a paper trail there that dates back to the early 2000s. Yeah. So they didn't just come up with it.
Yeah, someone whispered to me that they had these vaccines in play for these things long ago when they were toying with them. Mm-hmm. Someone else brought the idea to me that perhaps maybe this was accidentally released in the beginning and then happened to be at other facilities. Well, if theirs is accidental, we'll just leak ours out and then blah, 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 and let the test begin. Which scares me. If that's true, that scares me. that
Sad to say. I mean, I think I've mentioned it before on 3PNR. I myself was a CDC lab rat as a child, so it would not surprise me in the least.
Crazy.
As a matter of fact, I fully don't doubt it, and I believe it. Call it firsthand experience. I mean, listeners, those of you over the age of 30, you can do some Googling and find tidbits of information. There used to be this thing called the pink liquid pink liquid. The CDC chose at random, as it seemed, different places in the United States. And the pink liquid was the polio vaccine, but it was the live virus, not in stasis like you get in a shot. You know, when you get it in the shot, the virus is pretty much damn near dead. It's literally incapable of attacking your system because your immune system, even if you're immunocompromised, is still too strong for the stasis virus. The pink liquid was the polio virus ready for war. Basically, it could infect you, and it would infect you. I myself had side effects where I've lost feeling in a portion of my body from it. A kid across town from me, because the town I lived in was chosen by the CDC, he developed full-blown polio, and he was from a family of star athletes. So it was pretty much set in stone that he was going to be a star athlete. I mean, he had already shown signs from, I think, like the age of 4, you know, that he was on that track, and it was all taken away from him. If he's still alive to this day, last I heard many, many years ago was that he still has to use crutches and is basically crippled, all because we were chosen against our will. And it wasn't like, oh, you can take this one. No, they literally just said, you're taking the pink liquid, you know?
You know, some people, and you know, I'm not one, but some people say, hey, that's crazy. But if you look in the 50s and 60s, when we were experimenting with LSD, when I say we, I mean the government, it used to be a conspiracy that they were testing this out on people like Ted Kaczynski, Charles Manson, and then many years later, it comes to light that they were doing that. And then you look, and when you actually look up the records of Charles Manson, how many arrests he had, there's no way he got out of jail. There's no way. But he did. And that had to be, trust me, it's not divine intervention. It was an acronym intervention, because the experiment must go on. All right. So
you've got, what was it called? Indian Lake with MK Ultra, which people were like, oh, MK Ultra, the greatest conspiracy. Well, when that paperwork was found at the abandoned site, that kind of shot the conspiracy side of it. You got the Tuskegee experiment. You know, it used to be called the Manchurian Candidate. Now it's become the Bourne Identity. You know, that kind of played into MK Ultra,
right.
Or tied in, I should say. So yeah, it's not a hard stretch. I've had a conversation with a disbeliever that later became a believer after they went and spent, you know, weeks in the rabbit hole, as it were.
You know, there's someone reaching out to me about that, the MK. I mean, I'm not fully clear on what it is. I'm going to buff up on it, but there's a gentleman who that's his existence, is to look into that and find out what's real or not. And he'll be coming on soon. You know, another big thing too, and I just had this guy on the show. He was my last podcast before I took break, Joshua Shapiro. And he's into the crystal skulls, and I found that, you know, interesting, because these are things I like learning, right? That's why I do the podcast to begin with. I want people to understand that I don't do a lot of this because of some full belief system. I'm still trying to learn. I know very little, but he's really into the flat earth theory, and I don't subscribe. I told him this too. So I don't subscribe to that, by the way. It's just not of me to believe in that, but he drove points, and when you combine that with simulation theory, it gives it some plausibility, right? Because if it's a simulation, we wouldn't know anyhow. I mean, so depending on the program and the data that one person uses for perception versus the perception of another person, it could be different than what we see. But we have programs like Voyagers, that they're interstellar now. You know, we have a number of probes out there that are reaching beyond our own solar system. So I don't knock people about flat Earth, but when it comes to if it indeed a simulation, and when I say simulation, if it's an architect, if it's an almighty creator, whatever it may be, there's no limits. It could be the vastness of everything. You know, it's data, and you see how the data is with the internet, right? If you and I send a message to one another, it's floating out there in cyberspace indefinitely. It's never to be erased. You could delete it from your device, but it's still floating around out there somewhere. And our government's proved that by, retrieving these things and utilizing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. For me, it's tough, especially when you have blind belief. Now, which leads us to the subject of religion, and it's tough for me, man. I grew up Catholic, and that in itself put me in a position to question a lot, because you hear things from like your elders when they're talking about like an example, the Tower of Babel. I always had the hardest time wrapping my head around that, especially after NASA, So, but that's their way of explaining things the best that they can, I think. Like, why are we different by language, and why are we different by race? And they're like, well, the Tower of Babel, and they struck it down because, And I don't subscribe to that either. So, relatives of mine too, they're like, well, you got to believe blindly, right? Well, blind faith also flies planes into buildings. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's a dangerous thing to full out believe blindly in something without doing a little research, especially when there's a lot of bad evidence. Personally, I think there's more plausible evidence in ufology than there is in religion. And I don't mean to bash religion, but, again, like when you could see military videos of UFO versus like the word of someone else from thousands of years ago, which has clearly been altered. I don't know. How do you sit with that?
For me, like the Tower of Babel, as I've mentioned here and even on my own former podcast line, I'm a huge fan of Sumeria and Caldera and, all that descended from that in Babylonia. The Tower of Babel wasn't a tower per se like we think of it. It was actually humans replicating what they saw the sky gods doing, which we would call it today a launch point. Look at Cape Canaveral.
That's exactly what I thought. Whenever I hear it, that's exactly what I think of.
It's because how were the sky gods coming and going? Well, they would have used, not necessarily rockets like we use, but they would have used some type of tall building of some sort, or structure, I should say, to hold on to their craft and to, launch from. So when humans try to replicate that, because let's boil it down and be honest here, humans are monkeys in that sense. Monkey see, monkey do, So witnessing that, the humans think, what if we build one of these, limited mind humans? And I'm not saying that ancients were limited, but they certainly weren't up to speed on technology. I mean, even today.
Right.
Yeah.
Very primitive. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they would have just seen it and thought, well, if we build, we can do it too, or figure it out. So that would be why the tower was quote unquote destroyed, because, primitive man didn't need to be going outside of probably a 200 square meter or 200 square mile circumference, let alone going into space. Never mind the fact that they wouldn't survive it. We still can't even survive long trips with the Apollo disaster that was averted. So blind faith, it's kind of humorous when religions, this extends Christianity, Judaism, Islam, even paganism, has its plague of blind faith. It's kind of humorous because if you dig through each one, there's always quite the contrary in the message. Christianity, it doesn't say blindly. A good example of that is the story of Moses and the Pharaoh.
Right.
That's kind of a thing of the Pharaoh didn't believe in it. If we go by the biblical story and even, the non-altered biblical story, because that extends back into the Torah, or the Talmud, it's proven. It's not like, hey, blindly believe that, set my people free. I'm going to rain down some plagues to show you that I'm real and powerful,
Right.
So like you said, the blind faith is what drives the crazy.
I'll give you an example. especially when you mention plagues. I have a relative. I'm not going to mention their name, but whenever something happens in the world, every time I hear, well, this is a sign of the end. Well, if that's a sign of the end. Mankind, since the very dawn of us, have been at war. Some of the biggest atrocities happened long ago. Like, you can't even say today is a sign of the end. Hitler, he eradicated millions and millions of Jewish people. I mean, and the problem I have there is, well, why didn't God get involved there? And then you have that church in South America where a fault line gave out from underneath it, killing something like, I don't know, thousands of people right by a church. And then all I ever get in response for that is, well, the Lord works in mysterious ways. Well, so what, he gets to pick and choose what works and doesn't work? Like, why didn't he strike down Hitler immediately? Like, you'd think that'd be the thing to do, right? This guy's clearly out of his mind, clearly killing a lot of people. And that's an example of a charismatic leader who has all these people blindly following him, for the promise of whatever it is he was guaranteeing. Because that guy, when you listen to his speeches, it's like he delivered the speech to be manipulative of the entire group. Like, he knew exactly what to say. He was a smart guy, I guess, right? For an insane person. But that's
most of them are. Yeah,
that's what troubles me. It's like, relatives, and I'm not going to say this person's name, but every time something happens, like in 2004, the tsunami. Well, that's we're in end times. What? Why does that end time? It's geology. Something happened, right? We didn't do it, and I promise God that can't be God's message to convey to people. Like, well, I suppose people aren't acting right. I'll just wipe out 250,000 of them, teach them a real lesson. And amongst those 250,000, how many of them are believers or innocent? And you can't tell me monks who care that they're going to go to hell because they don't believe the same way. These are things that's the trouble with me with religion. There seems to be a lot of like stonewalling going on. Believe like me or die, or go to damnation.
The advent of hell actually came much later. I believe that was thanks to a German, or Teutonic at least.
Yeah, because the Vikings called it, what was it, Hellsheimer?
Hell. Yeah, it was hell because there was Hell, the goddess of the underworld. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it did drive from Germany. It was Germania, I believe it was.
Germania, yeah.
Yeah, and that's So I mean, the point I make is these are theories.
Yeah. So looking at it from that, it's kind of funny. I had a conversation a while back, shortly before I cut all my occult ties. Somebody had come to me and asked, because they were coming from a very Christian background, and they were asking me different things about it to try and, I guess, reckon between the two. And, I pointed out how hell is a later invention. And if you really look biblically and, out of all of the monotheism original text, the casting down wasn't into quote unquote hell. It was actually onto earth, onto the ground, as it were, because that was seen as the punishment, which, looking at it that way, it's like, oh, that is a pretty painful punishment. Because, I mean, look at what this world consists of,
Right.
It's aptly called the savage garden. So it's like, when you look at it that way, it's like, so think of it in terms of like an air force, even amongst humans, pilots, I know, 2 or 3 pilots, ask them what would be a terrible punishment. Having their wings taken from them,
Right.
Being grounded forcibly. When you think of it that way, in the same manner, you look at like the angelic fall and such, that would be one hell of a punishment, pun not intended, taking their ability to fly.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I one of the things I've come into, at least what I'm coming to believe in my own state of mind, is that Earth is a proving ground, right? And you're here, and depending on how you behave here, you either get recycled here because you're needed, or you're recycled because you didn't do great. And I think there's definitely other existence. There's definitely another existence out there. There's something parallel to us. And science is starting to stumble onto this. And again, when you look at the human body, and here's where simulation and the idea of avatar kind of play a role, the energy in your body stays pretty consistent. The thing that doesn't stay consistent is the body itself. It starts to, as you get older, decay, it breaks down. You get older, you get Alzheimer's, it decays, you die. But the energy is consistent. And so it's almost like we've been, in my opinion, our energy is into these bodies. And when the body's no longer well, it goes back to a source. And depending on how you were here, what you did here, and when I say here, I mean, I think there's multiple Earths all around the universe and the same kind of proving ground and the same kind of scenarios. And then when you play it in your mind like that, it definitely starts to feel like a program.
No, that's the deja vu, the familiarity, that would lend itself kind of interwoven between the two. The recycling is kind of a tricky thing. Like you talk about, like the energy and the decay. That's been one thing that I myself have questioned and debated and such, along with numerous others, of if we go by ancient times, humans lived longer. Science right now, the average life was like 40 years. We've kind of found out differently. And then you dig into religious text and you would see that, like, the story of, I believe, who was it? Noah may have lived to like 930 years,
if you look at it in this perspective, the lifespan of a human prior to ale and other chemical mixtures, when humans were living off the earth, and it's wrong because it's ironic that today, and I notice because this is what I do, I want to eat better, so I eat berries, I eat chicken, I don't fry it, I bake it. If I have juice, it's actual juice from a pomegranate. The point I make is they call it organic eating to prolong your life and be healthier. Meanwhile, primitive man at the beginning, that's all they did. They lived off the earth, minus eating raw meat. And even then, I'm not even certain that that's detrimental to you. I mean, because I'm starting to look at these carnivore diets, and when you read some of the ingredients, like, holy shit, it's crazy. But I think then you fast forward to the Middle Ages, where people are mixing ale and they weren't taking care of themselves, and then plagues were coming around. Nostradamus, if you read about Nostradamus, realized that a lot of people are dying of plague is because of poor hygiene. It was very, and they'll call you a witch for this, but he simply said, wash yourself,
Yeah.
And that was a solve to that. I mean, that's insane to think, but the Native Americans, when they were feeding off the land, their life expectancy was much greater. In fact, greater than current modern man today, because they were eating naturally. And how much of that plays an effect? I think a good amount. But when you hear about them saying, the life expectancy has gotten better, it's because in the Middle Ages, we were reckless. When we started getting to these social idiocracies, and there was an emperor or a czar, and then it was feast, and they got ale involved and other things. So, it got a little dangerous because people didn't take care of themselves at all.
I mean, in the Middle Ages, we thought, well, I can't say we because it wasn't a common thing, but people thought that you could cure rabies by throwing a person afflicted with rabies into the local lake to cure them. That's kind of going to shorten the life expectancy to, I don't know, about a week.
Well, another life expectancy, or some way to cut life short then too, is to prove or disprove being a witch back then. Some scary shit. And I know that they poked fun at this on the Holy Grail for Monty Python, but when you read about historical fact versus their joke, it's not far off. Like, if we throw her in the water and she floats, she's a witch. It's like, so
she's a witch, or she can hold her breath. Take your pick.
I mean, it's just the craziest thing, the things we did, and then like even Nostradamus and I often ask people, like, why is his material? It's like a weird poem, quatrains, and then you realize what he had to do. Then so he didn't get executed. He kind of had to like hide the meaning behind everything, which now leads us to we have to analyze it and come to some idea of what it is he's speaking about. But at the end of the day, he was a genius guy. Like, he helped solve a lot of major problems just by utilizing hygiene and common sense with physiology. It's crazy.
Yeah. Another thing with him, he was also involved in the occult. So a lot of his stuff, being an occultist myself, I can see it. A lot of the stuff that he saw, because he was a big fan of scrying. I think he was probably one of the world's most prevalent scryers ever, usefully anyways. It all comes down, it's like, think of trying to transcribe, let's use the Marvel movies, as much as I loathe them.
Yeah.
Imagine if you sat down or were set down in a chair and they play out on 10 different screens, all of the movies at once, and you have to transcribe it from your brain into words. You're going to have to use imagery and shorthand and stuff like that. So, that really comes down to, it's going to be difficult. You're going to get some of it out there. You're not going to get all of it, obviously, because people, why is his stuff so vague? Well, he was probably seeing thousands of years, if not longer, maybe eons worth of time, and multiple different timelines even.
Yeah.
Because there's been ones of his that he said would come to pass that didn't exactly, so there's the timeline branch.
I'm glad you said that. I've been reading a bit about that. The timeline that we live in, you and I currently, can be parallel to another timeline that, it's fluid. Time is a fluid thing. It's an arrow, right? It's constantly moving forward, but that doesn't mean just one, multiple timelines. And like you said, if he is forecasting the future, perhaps he is tapping into another timeline. If he is seen, if such a thing can be, right? Because the occult, as I read more about it, a lot of that stemmed from alchemy and science thinking, questioning. A lot of these people weren't ready to subscribe to some almighty God. They're like, well, something else makes more sense here scientifically, although they didn't use that at the time. Because, back then, if you had a scientific answer to a plague, let's say back then, you made a chemical to cure whatever disease. Clearly, you're a witch. We got to burn this guy. How did he do that? Where did he get such knowledge? And I wasn't aware of how strong that was, right? Like, again, and I know I said this before, but the ancient Greeks, remarkable inventions. The ancient Persians, more stars and star systems are named after Persian names because they were so into the stars then. That's all they cared about was science and discovery of stars. And one common thread happened amongst all these people, like the ancient Greeks, the ancient Persians, the ancient Egyptians. All these science-minded people had one thing in place, one thing take happen. Religion got involved. And the minute religion got involved, science and any kind of thinking like that, ban. It's not of God, right? God made here alone, et cetera, et cetera. And so it lets you know that we are definitely thousands and thousands of years behind on technology. I say this a lot, and I don't mean to beat the dead horse, but it blows my mind that we had, again, a faith system destroy the ability to by now be interplanetary, by now be better in our technology. But I don't know. Scary.
I wouldn't say it's religion that was the death of it.
Well, it's the people. Right.
Yeah, it was the small minds because, if we go back, like you said, the ancients, again, ancient Sumeria, ancient Chaldera that came after Sumeria, and then Babylon, came after Chaldera. Babylon developed things that were both interwoven, as we know it, with religion and faith or science, blended together, and it worked quite well. It was the small minds that destroyed it. Even today, like we were saying earlier, the cure for cancer or whatever, it's the small minds that undermine it. Take into account, look at these militant atheists.
They believe in no spirituality, no religion, nothing. They still have the small mind outlook of control, isolate, destroy, so it really doesn't come down to the religion itself. That's one of the things that was so hotly debated in my former podcast was, people always want to point the finger at religion. And it's like, it's not the religion itself doing it, it's the small minds within it. Like I was saying, Sumeria, they were deeply religious in that sense. Like, if you weren't religious, you were probably insane back then.
I think Sumerians were more, rather than religious, very spiritual. Because if you read about their first off, their discoveries and their ideas of the solar system, the way they had it accurate back then, that's taught. There's no way that they had the technology to see that. So something educated them to that.
Mm-hmm. And they're open about it. It was the gods from the sky that came from beyond.
Right.
I'm trying to think of the exact example. Sin actually taught them about the stars. And digging into who Sin was, it's very apparent that he was a non-human entity. We would call it today an extraterrestrial, an interdimensional being. I think interdimensional being is probably a better descriptor, because when you say extraterrestrial, you think of the Greys, the Draconians,
right?
Stuff like that. But interdimensional beings are, I would equate them kind of like a spirit or a ghost, for those not well versed in the differences. Interdimensional beings can actually go right through time and space, whereas extraterrestrials have to kind of bend it. So, spiritual, yes, they were highly spiritual, but it also was a religion. I mean, they worshiped at the temples. So I think that's kind of where they blend it, which, I myself, coming from a spiritual / religious, background, it makes sense. I don't think that, like you were saying about time, time is a construct, really. That's why we've never found an accurate way to measure it. They're actually starting to discover, what was it? Voyager 1 crossed the fire belt and didn't just instantly go silent and evaporate, because they found out it's actually completely different. Everything we thought was a universal law went right out the window with that passing through it. The solar winds and such are not, likely to tear stuff apart the minute that it gets into it.
Well, we saw evidence of that in 2012, right? We had that that massive coronal outburst, and we thought, oh, this is going to be really bad for us, and it didn't play out exactly the way science thought it would.
That's kind of where I think it's.
In that same year, we had a comet. Do you remember that in 2012? That comet was passing by. I remember being outside and seeing it. I was like, oh, it's a bright star, and then also in that same year, the coronal burst, like that solar storm. And I remember there being, that's just people though, right? Treachery. Like, oh my God, this is a sign,
Well, the signs are out there. That's one of the things I often tell people is they're like, oh, everything can't be a sign. Well, it can be. It's just up to you to interpret it. Right. I'll tell you right now, it'll drive you mad, like into sheer insanity, trying to interpret all of them. If you want a simple exercise on that, just go into chaos theory and the relevance of time. After about 6 days, you're going to lose your freaking mind, and it's going to take months to undo it. But once you see it, you can never unsee it. It's kind of like that running joke on the internet: what has been seen cannot be unseen. Science has kind of gotten behind it, kind of trying to interwoven themselves into proving, disproving, or coming to terms with, spiritual belief, and they call it the mathematics of God. Once you get a small taste of it, you can't ever come back from it. It's a thing of, I guess, to use a analogy, it is the forbidden fruit on the tree in that sense. Is once you taste it, you can never untaste it, and you can't go back from it.
I get it. Look, I had a rabbit hole when I was a kid. I saw my aunt rented a movie called The Man Who Saw Tomorrow. It was narrated and hosted by Orson Welles about Nostradamus. And, you know, when you watch that film, it plays out the way, well, at least the way they made the film, it plays out like Nostradamus was it. This is the dude. He could see everything and blah, blah, blah. And they talk about all the things he forecasted that came to light. And then there was the third Antichrist. And they were talking about this. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's called The Man Who Saw Tomorrow. Now, the irony of that is that the third Antichrist was supposed to rise up in the Middle East and you know, unleash his, I guess, to the best Nostradamus could depict what he saw, this would be like a nuclear war. And then you fast forward to current times, and it's not exactly playing out the way and by the threats and by the nations, but like we said earlier, what timeline was he seeing? Because it could be that this plays out in our timeline the same way as he said, just a different person at the helm, different kind of leader, right? So that film had me hours, Elric, hours investigating who is going to be this third Antichrist, and something about a blue turban, and I'm looking up all these different people, and then when you look at like the the countless princes in the Middle East, a lot of blue turbans, you know. So I see where it is, and I see where people, when they want to learn something more, especially like with religion and answering the unknown, it could make people crazy. But it takes one person, like let's say tomorrow, Elric, you're like, you know what? I have a theory about Scientology and simulation being conjoined. If you're charismatic enough, millions of people will follow you, and they'll blindly follow you. And there could be a danger in that, because even if you got it right or wrong, it's gonna cause them to be combative with people that believe differently. And that's where humanity has a big problem. It's okay to believe what you want, and it's okay to form a theory or an opinion, but it's dangerous to stay steadfast and not be able to evolve. Like you're cutting ties, you're doing things differently because you're evolving, you're learning something new. And one of a gentleman I'd spoken to some time ago, he was a missionary, Christian missionary, and he changed. He went out in missions to other countries of help, starving people that are sick. And he altered his belief system. And it's not that he doesn't believe in God. And it's also that, I don't even want to say atheist. He believes there's a higher energy out there. It's just not what he thought it was all these years. And I asked him, what made you think this? He goes, well, I learned new things. He was in the depth of where these people, they were given Christianity, but because they lacked our luxuries, they got to interpret it differently. And then he said, key word, interpret. And so faith and religion's a good thing again, loosely if you interpret it in some way or another, but you can't read the Bible like a rule book, right? Because it doesn't make sense. Like some of the stories are just what they're supposed to be, like folklore with the right and wrong scenarios. It's just, I'm not bashing religion, but that's a PBS thing for me. Here's a story about Timmy, and he stole candy from the store, got in trouble, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? You're just, so that's where it is for me. But when I hear this guy alter who he is, because he evolved, he learned something new, as I do. I try to anyway. I am not steadfast in anything if I can help it, unless I come to a conclusion like, all right, well, here's what I believe about this, until I can learn more about it. And until then, I'm here. And then when I learn more, I'm going to take the next step up the ladder. I would hope anyway. So that's why I applaud you. You're going to cut ties and try to do things differently. It's the smartest thing you're going to do, because it's going to allow you room to learn something new and figure out something better, or, whatever life throws you anyhow.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how you mentioned that, him interacting with people, led him to a more broad sense. For me, a lot of my cutting of ties and stuff, it actually predated me, cutting the ties was somebody asked me what made me change my outlook on things. It's all long since gone now. But I used to be very anti a lot of things. And somebody said, well, what made it change? Why is it, if we go back to, the Elric of 2018, 2019 to the Elric of 2022, they're widely different. And, it's, that they actually pinpointed it, August of 2021, by the change. And my statement to them was conversations with God. I had planned originally to do a podcast on it, but it really never came to fruition because it just kind of became plain that it would be one side a sermon of sorts and the other side pointless to try and explain it to people, because they're going to take from it what they will, right, not what I'm conveying. That was a large portion of why I shut all the things down that I used to be attached to, because people were just taking from it what they wanted. It was a feeding trough of theory or a feeding trough of justification for some. It didn't, and much like religion, it didn't hold meaning past what they wanted it to mean. So for me, it became pointless.
Right.
I'm of a different outlook solely from my own experiences. And I could sit here for 6 hours and explain it. 10 people listening here are going to interpret it 100 different ways.
Right. I mean, listen, there's layers. Like, there's definitely layers to people, and there's definitely chapters in life. And it's good you're changing. I say this to a lot of people. It's good to change. Don't think that, well, you're selling out. Because me, a long time ago, today I'm an approachable guy. I'm pretty cool, laid back. But me in my early years, I was an aggressive psychopath, man. Work out and hang out with the boys, drink and blah, blah, blah. And God knows the fist fights and stupid nonsense. And then, the next chapter of me. Then it gets to the point where, kind of got a grip on what this thing called life. And here's my belief system. And I still wasn't really approachable. It's kind of a sarcastic asshole. And then now there's this me of hindsight. Like, all right, well, now you've been through all this and you actually want to learn. You're making the time and room to do so. You have to both be approachable and open. Because it turns out things that we knew for certain 20 years ago is not the case now. In fact, just 20 years ago, if you think 20 years ago in terms of science, think of how many planets and solar systems and galaxies and think how many things we've learned in that time. Crazy, right? And then the leaps in I say this as an example of people. Look at your cell phone 20 years ago. Look at your cell phone now. It's insane, the difference, right? Look at the supplements you took. The supplements I took 20 years ago, versus today. Now they're more specific. You could actually stack supplements to suit your actual needs for both health, for fitness, for focus, cognitive. It's so you have to change, because if I said, well, I started taking zinc and vitamin C every day at age 15 and I'm not changing because it's always worked. Well, that's crazy, because now I take zinc, vitamin C. I use some turmeric for this. I'm taking another supplement that helps me being more cognitive, lion's mane. If I just didn't change who I was, it stuck to the regular, supplements. I'm not enhancing myself. I'm not allowing myself to grow or become more evolved anyhow in a lot of ways. So by you changing who you are and you expanding on the way you think, I applaud that. Good for you. You should do that. More answers will be found. I'm not a complacent person. I hate the idea. If you heard in this podcast, and I punched my theory out about aliens and what I think they are, it's gradually changing because I'm starting to learn more. I'm starting to have a grander understanding of what they could be versus just what this is what I think and I'm sticking to it. I'm learning, and you have to, and there's no harm in saying I was wrong, and there's no harm in saying, well, I just want to know more, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's the constant thing.
there's a song that a certain line in it. It's Prometheus by Sectanic. It goes, "We're all on the search for the next level." You know.
Yeah, as we should be. I don't like being content. Yeah, I mean, I'm
Right.
sure you got to learn that about me. I have. Well, I got a tough one coming. I got a guy who specializes in Christianity, and I've been communicating with him back and forth via, email. And he challenged me because he heard me on one of my podcasts. Like, wow, it seems like you're beating up on religion. I'm really not, though. I think it's a great thing, especially if you need to read verbiage to know not to kill other people. Imagine you need literature to say, wait, so it's not right to kill the guy next door? Damn it.
Well, don't we all? I mean, look at another example, Right In 2 by Tool. Monkeys killing monkeys over pieces of ground.
Yep.
It's kind of funny that's one of the things that my former associates used to point out was, I don't need a book to tell me to be, a decent person. Well, maybe you do, boiling it down. Maybe you really should start there anyways. But if you really look at it, I mean, look at places, and this applies even to modern day, but even in history, where there wasn't some form of, let's call it written or oral guidance. What were they? Mostly savages.
Yeah.
Even where, and the sad part is the learned savage, and I don't mean this by like cultural or anything, people sometimes misinterpret. This goes for all. Sometimes the learned savages would learn to twist the words of the oral tradition or the oral reinforcement or the written reinforcement of, don't be a complete and utter jackass. They would twist it to fit their narrative to justify their jackassery.
Right.
I find it modern day a good example. Look at some of the worst people we have in society. They congregate on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, take your pick.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the fact that they, be it from, whatever background. I mean, a hot one to pick on is look at the incels. They're a dangerous group of people in some instances.
It's a good point because you ever want to see the real face of anger? Just go on social media and say something positive and watch people spin something negative out of it. It's crazy.
I spent years doing it, so yeah, I can validate that 100%.
Yeah.
Especially with today's drive for not being accountable, today's drive for, call a spade, being the shittiest you can be for attention. It really feels like society has gone back to being first graders with no teacher present. You've got your good ones, you got your bad ones, and then you got your ones that are trying to burn the building down just for laughs.
It's crazy, man. Like I know a girl who legit told me I've known her for years. And here's the ironic part of this. Would never guess her to be this way, but she has an Instagram and she's very fleshy in her Instagram, which so be it. Look, I'm pro all of that. You want to express yourself, do whatever you want. If it's creative, do it. I'm not bashing anything, but she told me bald-faced, like, if I don't start put out a certain amount of pictures per month, I'll lose my subscriber or the followers. And I asked her, I'm like, why does that mean so much? And it's for sales. Like people go to her page, they click on her link. Then they're going to her whatever private website is. It's crazy. And she told me that specific picture upset a majority of people in comments, and she took it down. Not because she was worried about upsetting someone, but because the effect it would have on her status. I was like, what? It's crazy. Like, when did it get to that? I mean, I guess that's the way it is, right?
It's the seeking validation. Taryn Southern did a song
I believe it's Voices. It's on her I Am AI album. Definitely everybody listening should, have a listen to it. It talks about counting likes as your worth. That's kind of what social media has given rise to. Even you and I, we're so close in age, we can remember back when it was like nobody gave a damn if you got 1,000 reactions to, a post or a comment or a picture. It was like, oh, cool. That's neat. Kind of like when a little kid shows you their favorite toy. That's neat. You don't understand it, but okay, cool. Glad it means something to you.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I've never been like you here. I am in a podcast. I speak to people. I like speaking to people. I like hearing people's point of view, but I'm not a people pleaser. I've never really been that way. I've never been really overly concerned about like, well, what do I do to spin a positive effect on myself publicly today? I think trouble falls with it. Just be yourself. People don't like you. They don't like you,
It literally is the epitome of the poison path. I know a handful of people that, like I said, former associates that even right now, I can guarantee they are sitting there obsessively plotting on how to get attention. What can they say or do? Who do they have to run over?
That's nuts.
For attention. That's all it is. They really just want attention. When they don't get attention, they will amp it up and amp it up. They are like spoiled little children that don't get their way. I'm waiting for the day when they start having hold my breath protests, for when they don't get the attention that they feel like they should be getting. I'm waiting for them to start holding their breath. And honestly, I'm hoping for it. But it's like and not even just these people specifically, it's a broader sense. I mean, look at TikTok. Look at some of the crazy stuff these people are doing in the name of TikTok challenges.
Yeah, man.
What?
That should bother people.
For some likes, for some attention, for viral fame that lasts a whole whopping 30 minutes,
I don't know, man. It's the world has certainly changed because, to become a music star today, it just, and that's, YouTube's a blessing in a lot of ways, but it's also a problem because a lot of people, their careers take off from YouTube. We've seen a lot of this, the millionaires from YouTube. So, the idea of a record label mattering anymore doesn't matter. In fact, I don't know. The music sales really don't I don't think musicians make money outside of like concerts, right?
No, they make it through independent, being friends with two underground but yet kind of known bands, Seven and Eldest 11. Shout out to both of them. They're completely independent.
Right.
Cutter of Eldest 11, he does, it's all home done. Seven, he does his stuff. He's got a recording studio. They release their albums on their own money, which comes from people buying. It's all 100% self-funded. Record labels at this point are just massive ways to destroy your career.
Well, they always have been, to be honest. I mean, they've never been. You hear all these nightmare stories of like past artists who've just been robbed, just been taken. And today, like with the advent of YouTube and other uploadable platforms, where does it go? Like TV too. TV's in trouble. Mm-hmm. TV's in big trouble. Like if you're a network, you're in trouble. You got like Netflix and Hulu competing to be the best. And I've seen this pattern, by the way, where they introduce these movies and then Hulu will introduce the movies parallel to that. And then some of them, in some cases, have the same movies on there. It's like they're trying to see who's winning this war. But that should speak volumes because networks are going to be in trouble because of these platforms. A lot of people I hear from now want to pitch ideas to Netflix, Hulu, and these are streaming platforms. So in the next decade, I don't know, man. I don't think a lot of networks are going to be around. I don't even think radio. What's going to happen to radio? Podcasts are growing. People are doing their own talk shows. You could right now go on YouTube and there's a guy playing music. There's 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, modern today mixed, and there's DJs just doing this on YouTube. What happens to radio when you could absolutely go on YouTube or even Spotify and say, well, I want to listen to this, and you could get that. I don't know. I think industry's in trouble.
It is. It'll have to evolve if it wants to survive. But the thing of it is that it can only evolve so much.
Right.
It's from a bygone era. I'm a big fan, like you mentioned, of YouTube. I go and watch, kind of overviews of like the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. And like you said, radio, look at how radio evolved, in the 20s, where only the rich could afford the means to listen to the radio because it was so hard to manufacture.
Right.
And by the 50s, almost everybody had a radio. So just in the span of our current lifetimes, you and I being over the age of 30, just in that space of time, I mean, even we've experienced ourselves, like you said, with cell phones.
I mean, right now, and I said this before, but my watch, you know how important my watch is? It's crazy. It tells me when I sleep, tells me my stress levels.
Yeah.
It's a Garmin Venue too. It's a very, very accurate smartwatch. I based my pick on what had the most accurate heart rate and the most accurate sleep study. And I'm one of these people that I don't buy something based on one review. It's like 2 weeks of watching videos, reading content, coming down, narrowing it down. Really, what I should have got was the Apple Watch. And here's the reason why. Apple Watch doesn't hold good charge. Like this Garmin I have will run days without needing recharge. And I don't like the Apple phones. I don't like the operating system. So that was the selling point. So I went to the next best thing, which in my opinion is just this Garmin product. And now there's this Garmin Phoenix 7 I'm looking at. I'm like, I just got this thing a year ago and there's already a Phoenix 7,
Mm-hmm.
But the point I make is I rely heavily on it. And I didn't notice it until like maybe a few months ago. I was like looking at my sleep study. I'm like, all right, how did I sleep last night? What's my, did I get my body rest? Is my body rest there? And I was like, holy shit, I'm dependent on this. I can't even believe I'm at this point. Right. And then make matters worse, I depend on YouTube's algorithm to kind of show me something I want to learn that day. Cause I watch a lot of documentaries. I like learning shit and I depend on their algorithms. And that's when I came to terms with the fact that I evolved unknowingly. And so back to what we said earlier, what if AI shut us down? I'd be screwed. It would take some time for me to get back to those comforts, to live that way, but I'd be in big trouble. Like every day I wake up, Elric, I look at my sleep score, my body rest, blah, yada, yada, yada. And then as I plot my day, even if I go shoot pool, I have a routine. If I'm going to shoot pool, I'm going to have a good breakfast. I'm going to get there, warm up, then play some games, get home by a certain time. And I swear to God, I'm staring at my watch the whole time. What's my heart rate at? How many steps do I have today? It's crazy that this has happened. It's crazy. I don't know. Where do we go in 10 years?
Right. I mean, looking back, my own, 10 years ago, it's kind of a habit since, shutting down my former venture of not being so connected to my phone or my computer, trying to make a habit of it.
Right.
Outside of when I choose to, or, things, like this, for example, I have those still that I keep focused on, but it's like at this point, I'm more trying to pull myself out of the digital world. Because it's like I've noticed that the digital world has become like a parasite.
Yep.
I try not to be attached to my phone, even though I'm not going to deny that I'm a Spotify junkie, Yeah,
I mean, but you're music, documentaries? I mean, I'm the same way. I don't do silence. When I go to bed at night, which I can't do in silence, by the way.
Yeah, same.
I have to have I have these YouTube playlists, documentaries about space, about, history, whatever it may be. And I always make sure I choose someone who's well-spoken. A lot of smaller videos I play in the forefront of that, like Astrum. You ever listen to Astrum on YouTube? Alex McColgan. The guy, he's great. You can listen to him for hours. I promise you, go right to sleep and wake up educated. It's and then what I do at the tail end of it is I have a lot of like these relaxing music, that 432 hertz, which I've learned in recent times is a more relaxing stage. But I can't sleep without that. And then again, I became reliant on a technology to help me cope, to help me get through a day or a night. And that's, I don't know. You'd ask me just 10 years ago if I'd be that way. I'd be like, no shot. But yeah, it's happened. And for people in denial, like this neural thing, I'll get that in a heartbeat. You know, it's just, imagine something that could just help you forecast how you need to eat that day or exercise but then just by me saying that, Elric, what does that say about me?
Right.
You know what I mean? Isn't that a scary thought that I'm completely subscribed to something helping me get through a day? And it's not just me. It used to be, if I walked every day from point A to point B, I got my exercise in, I go shoot pool at night, I'd get home and tune down, whatever it is. But now it's technology. It's replaced instinct completely.
For me, it's always been technology. Like I'm one of the people that sleeps with music on, or, YouTube. I try not with YouTube because, let's face it, the YouTube algorithm is psychotic.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Some of you guys might have better luck than I do with it, but
I use premium, and I make playlists, long playlist. I mean, that's no ads. And here's another thing too, right? I pay premium to get rid of ads.
Yeah. What a nice scam they got us in on that, kind of like really. Spotify.
Yeah, we pay it.
Yeah. Like I pay like $20 a month almost for Spotify premium because I don't want freaking ads when I'm sitting there listening. I mean, funny enough, I just recently spent like $50 on Car Thing by Spotify. Because doing long drives, to and from work and such, or even just general, I hate having to sort through my phone at a red light to switch playlist.
Yep.
So I forked out the $50 for Car Thing so that I can just, tap it on the Car Thing. So it's like they really got us into the premium, no ads thing. I mean, thinking back to when I was a kid, that was the most hated part of radio was.
Yeah. That's the truth.
The commercials. So.
Yeah, imagine, you're right. Cause I remember driving to and from school, and the radio would play a commercial. Like, God damn it! You know what I mean? I just got into mode. Yeah, I get it.
I've tried it. I used YouTube for a while because I didn't realize that there was a certain album available on Spotify. So I was using YouTube to listen to it, and every so often the ad would play while I'm driving, and it would totally, take my focus away. And I'm like, fuck, so then it's like, get to Spotify and premium, no ads, listen to the whole album or whatever order I want it to be in, uninterrupted, Yeah,
it's scary, man, because in YouTube, they got smart. They went back to that background, where you could close the app out and still have it playing in the background. They got rid of that for some small amount of time. I don't know why they did that, but they quickly realized that was a bad thing because people like me would do multitude of things while the music or the documentary is in the background, not even on your screen.
Yeah. Didn't they move that to just premium?
Or maybe they did because I have premium, so maybe that's the case.
I was gonna say I think that's premium,
but even on premium they didn't have it for a while.
Yeah, I remember that.
But when they brought it back, I'll tell you what, it's instrumental in the things I do because I listen to a lot of classical music when I'm like if I'm reading and researching or buffing up on a topic, I listen to Mozart and like Beethoven and 432 hertz, right? And I do that because I enjoy the rhythms and the subtleties of that while I'm reading. Because if you listen like one of your favorite rock albums, you're singing along before you're not even reading shit anymore. You're up there getting down. It's they did themselves a favor by doing this, and then it just reminds me of how dependent we're becoming on our technologies, and me included. I used to say, months ago, someone's like, "Well, what do you need?" I'm like, "I don't need nothing, man. Good, I go through every day." But then you realize how much you need stuff. It's crazy. The things how it changes, So let me ask, Elric, before we close out, in the next, where do you think religion's going to be in 20 years as a whole?
it'll have to come to terms with the changing reality, and it'll have to reckon its past, which it seems to be doing. And this goes for all religions. It has to realize that it's not solely just this, it's not solely just that. Speaking from the pagan side, a lot of us are starting to realize that we can run from things for so long, but it's still there.
Yeah, you're going to come to face.
Yeah, the only thing we're running from is ourselves. So I think religion on a whole is going to have to come to terms that, we used to say it was just this and nothing more, but the trick is it's really everything more,
Yeah, 10 years ago, I mean, this is only a decade ago, there was YouTube videos where there was a girl, I said this on the podcast before, and she's explaining how dinosaur bones weren't real. Obviously a Christian channel, explaining how they're not real and how they're rocks, and we mistake them out there. And so a lot of different Christian things 10 years ago were placing, doubt and disbelief. And now, today, and just this afternoon, I'll share the link with you when we get done with podcast, I'm hearing some of these same Christian people explain how the possibility of aliens could be real and why they might be. And he's going to go into deep on that because it sounds, and I don't want to use the word desperate, but it sounds desperate. Like, we got to fix this before they actually reveal the facts. And then we're going to look like fools. Right. And I can tell you this for certain because I have relatives who have told me to my face, there's no aliens. It's the enemy making you think these things. It's here. I know, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward to your same leaders are now starting to, make room for the ideas because they have to. Mm-hmm. Not saying there's going to be some that don't have pushback. Certainly, if aliens become here, or then we know of them, right? They become common knowledge. Surely there's going to be people like, well, those are the devil, and we got to fight them. It's just that's going to happen. That's humanity.
Most of those people will be our world leaders.
Yeah, that's a damn devil. So, but it's I think in I don't know in 20 years time. I think we're speeding up if you look at what we're doing right now, we're doing another government speech on extraterrestrial life or quote unquote disclosure or quote unquote town hall about it or whatever they want to title it. But it's speeding up. And it just so happens to be that billionaires are going to space now, not because they care about, the human race and exploration. It's just, can I do it better than that guy? That's all it is. And they're going to bring celebrities up there. And eventually, we're going to run into something that we really definitely, it's not going to be some image that our government's got, some video that's been declassified. It's going to be an in-your-face moment involving a celebrity. And then, forget it. Viral.
Well, if they do take a celebrity, take the Kardashians, and let's hope that the extraterrestrials hold them for ransom.
No, they're going to throw them back. They're going to be selective.
Probably. Sad truth there.
Yeah, they're going to be really selective. Like, yeah, we can't have those people. They're crazy.
In all honesty, they would probably attach it to a kinetic weapon and just be like, if this is what the Earth has, we got to take it out. This is a danger.
That's why I think personally, I've never witnessed anything paranormal or UFOs. And I think it's a lot because of who I am. I think like, this guy, man, he's a pain in the ass. He's going to ask us a bunch of questions. I'm not going to deal with that.
I think next time I'm in Florida, I'll have to drop by and introduce you to the paranormal world. I know of a few ways. I've done a few things that have left people speechless. I had a former client that actually was staunch against the paranormal. And after a 3-hour Zoom call with me, they fully believed in it because I had something come through that recited something. There's no way in hell I would have known. I mean, I had only known this person for probably 3 days, and something came through and told them about a shadow that they used to see as a small child. There's no way I would have known that. It relayed exactly where it used to stand and watch him, and it freaked the ever living shit out of them to the point that they could no longer deny
that there are things in the world. So yeah, I'll have to drop by and
Yeah, I mean, I'm delaying it. I was supposed to start a documentary here soon. I was going to travel around and do it, but I don't know enough yet, and I haven't done enough research, and I got to build a stronger network before I travel, because once I'm out traveling, I need a set roadmap. I need to know where I'm going, what I'm doing. But till that point, I mean, I'll eventually get there. In the meantime, Elric, we had another great conversation, and I know we're going to do it again.
oh, definitely. Thanks for having me.
Indeed. Thank you for being on. And everyone listening, good day, good evening, or whatever it is for you. And I'm going to talk to Elric in post.